I'm Sushant and welcome to this online tutorial by Quest. Jaundice is one of the commonest conditions in medical wards. It is defined as yellowish discoloration of the skin, conjunctiva and mucous membranes due to deposition of bilirubin. In this tutorial, let's try to understand an approach to patient with jaundice. Bilirubin is predominantly produced from the old RBCs. Heme from the RBCs is metabolized to bilirubin in spleen, liver and the bone marrow, predominantly via the reticuloendothelial cells. Two important enzymes involved over here are heme oxygenase and biliverdin reductase. But this bilirubin, also known as unconjugated bilirubin, is not soluble with water. To make it soluble, it is attached to albumin, and this albumin acts as its carrier to the liver. Once it reaches the liver, it is taken up without the albumin, and it is bound within the liver to glutathione S transferase. From here, it is transferred to endoplasmic reticulum, and over here the process of conjugation occurs with glucuronic acid. An important enzyme which takes part in conjugation is bilirubin UDPGT. After conjugation, it is sent across to the bile canaliculi via the MDR-P2 channels. Once in the biliary tract, bilirubin reaches the small intestines and eventually is metabolized by the gut bacteria to urobilinogen. 80 to 90% of this urobilinogen gets excreted in the feces, while the remaining 10 to 20% is reabsorbed back to the liver. Only a small fraction of urobilinogen is excreted via the kidneys. This is the complete cycle from heme to bilirubin and its excretion. Normal bilirubin is less than 1 to 1.5 mg per deciliter. But once it crosses more than 3 mg per deciliter, that's when we notice jaundice. The total bilirubin can be present in conjugated or direct form as well as the unconjugated or indirect form. When we tested via the Van der Berg reaction, up to 30% of this bilirubin is direct bilirubin or conjugated bilirubin. But by the newer techniques, we actually know that the conjugated component is less than 5%. Now, the causes of jaundice could be broadly into three categories. These could be disorders of bilirubin metabolism, this could be liver disorders, or these could be obstruction of the bile duct. Let's have a look at each one of them. The isolated disorders of bilirubin metabolism could lead to either unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia or conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. More common is unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, which could be because of increased bilirubin production. This could occur because of hemolysis, because of ineffective erythropoiesis, or as a result of massive blood transfusion. Important to remember is such patients would not have very severe jaundice and bilirubin would be less than 4 to 5 mg per deciliter. Some drugs could interfere with the uptake of bilirubin by the liver. Important here is rifampicin. But a much more important cause here is decrease in the process of conjugation itself. The commonest reason why conjugation could be affected is a disease known as Gilbert syndrome. Patients of Gilbert syndrome very often are asymptomatic. In fact, in most cases, this is an incidental finding, but still it contributes to 3 to 12% cases of jaundice. Patients of Gilbert's are more likely to be men and they present to us with jaundice which is fluctuating. Fasting and dehydration are known to worsen their jaundice, though they rarely come to us because of this presentation. The reason behind Gilbert is the decrease in the activity of UDPGT enzyme, and this is due to a mutation in the promoter region of the gene of this enzyme. Patients of Gilbert's do not require separate therapy. But a much more important disorder is the Crigler-Najjar syndrome. This is because of a mutation in the coding region of the UDGDP gene. There are two types of Crigler-Najjar. Type 1, which is more severe, is a complete absence of the enzyme activity. So these patients present in the neonatal age group with kernicterus, that is when bilirubin starts depositing in the neuronal tissue and causes neuronal damage. So they need prompt recognition, immediate phototherapy, and in most cases a liver transplantation. The milder version, that is type 2 Crigler-Najjar, is when there is a decrease in the activity of the enzyme and patients present in childhood. The drug of choice here is phenobarbital because it increases the enzyme activity. Finally, the physiologic jaundice of newborns is also because of a delayed expression of the UDPGT gene. Most of these patients might not require therapy because the jaundice is short-lasting, but since it is in the neonatal age group, phototherapy might sometimes be required to prevent kernicterus. Now looking at causes of conjugated or mixed hyperbilirubinemia, we have two conditions which are very similar to each other. Both of them are benign and we might not be able to really differentiate between them clinically. One of them is the Dubin-Johnson syndrome, where the patient has an absence of the MDRP2 channel, and the second one is the Rota syndrome, where the problem is in hepatic storage of bilirubin due to a deficiency of sinusoidal transport proteins. Neither of them requires any specific therapy. An important group of disorders which can present with jaundice are the liver disorders. There can be a variety of conditions which can lead to jaundice, starting with acute hepatocellular disorders. These could be viral disorders like viral hepatitis. This could be exposure to drugs or toxins like alcohol. This could be ischemic conditions or metabolic conditions of the liver. Similarly, chronic hepatocellular disorders can also present with jaundice. Important to note here is chronic liver disorders, when they present with jaundice, are almost always associated with liver cirrhosis. So we could have viral liver cirrhosis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, metabolic conditions, or autoimmune hepatitis. A third, not so common but an important group to consider are intrahepatic cholestatic causes. These are conditions where we do not have really hepatocellular injury, neither is there a biliary obstruction, but there is still a decrease in the bile formation. Three broad categories here could be infiltrative disorders that disrupt the bile ductules. Commonest here are granulomatous disorders like tuberculosis and sarcoidosis. Similarly, you could have an injury to the cholangiocytes like immune-mediated injury seen in primary biliary cirrhosis. We could also have some conditions which are with a normal histology and still having intrahepatic cholestasis. These could be paraneoplastic conditions associated with lymphomas, a condition known as Stoffer's syndrome. Finally, jaundice during pregnancy is an important consideration, and here you could have some benign conditions like hyperemesis gravidarum or intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, or some conditions which require immediate therapy and can have poor prognosis like acute fatty liver of pregnancy, preeclampsia, or the HELLP syndrome. Moving to the last group of disorders which can present with jaundice are those having bile duct obstruction, and of course the commonest cause here are gallstones. Most common gallstones are the cholesterol stones and they have their own typical presentation. Similarly, diseases of the bile duct, which could be congenital diseases, inflammatory conditions, infections, or neoplastic conditions, can present with jaundice. An external compression of the biliary tree in form of malignancies of the pancreas or pancreatitis or compression by external lymph nodes could also present with obstructive jaundice. So how do we really approach a patient who comes to us with jaundice? There are so many causes, but it's easy if we look at it systematically. First, of course, is to take a good history and examine the patient well. If there are any localizing features to the right hypochondrium, that's more suggestive of an obstructive cause. Similarly, if someone has prodromal features, that would be more suggestive of viral etiologies. We are obviously searching for any features of cirrhosis. But in the lab test, liver function test, especially alkaline phosphatase, is an important test. This enzyme is expressed in the hepatocytes and the cholangiocytes. And whenever there is biliary obstruction or intrahepatic cholestasis, there is an increase in the release of alkaline phosphatase in the blood. So if there is an increase in alkaline phosphatase out of proportion to other parameters of LFT, we can safely conclude that we are looking at obstructive etiologies. Another enzyme which is a marker of hepatobiliary disease is gamma-glutamyl transpeptidase. Aminotransferases, that is alanine aminotransferase or aspartate aminotransferase, are increased in hepatocellular injury. Similarly, prothrombin time is also a part of LFT, and it is increased in patients who have cirrhosis, who have hepatocellular injury, who have a prolonged biliary obstruction that interferes with vitamin K absorption. Finally, all patients of jaundice should undergo an imaging test, and the first test of choice here is the ultrasound of the abdomen. This is especially helpful if there is an obstructive cause to jaundice and also in some hepatocellular disorders. CT scans are not always required, but if you are suspecting an intrahepatic space-occupying lesion, CT scan would help us to delineate better. Similarly, if you want to look at the biliary tree, tests like MRCP or ERCP are better than the ultrasound. To summarize, if we have a patient of jaundice, we have to remember that bilirubin that is coming is a product of heme metabolism and it is being managed by the liver. So jaundice could occur either because of an isolated disorder of bilirubin metabolism, because of liver disorders, or because of an obstruction to the bile duct. A good history with examination and basic LFT should help us in guiding the likely etiology, and wherever required, appropriate imaging, especially ultrasound, would help us to reach the diagnosis. If there are any questions, feel free to discuss with me on the Quest tab. Thank you and Jai Hind.